Welcome to episode 457. 20 years ago, the challenge was finding reliable health information. Today, the challenge is knowing who or what to trust. As AI transforms the way we learn, I believe Ayurveda has something more important than ever to offer us. Not just information, but connection, discernment, and a reminder of our own inner wisdom. As the podcast celebrates its 9th anniversary, I'm exploring the changes I'm seeing and why human connection matters now more than ever. Welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda Podcast. I'm your host, Colette. And if you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend starting with the first few episodes where I introduce the foundations of Ayurveda and the doshas. To learn more, work with me, or explore my offerings, you can visit elementshealingandwellbeing.com. And for podcast updates, join me on Instagram at Elements of Ayurveda Podcast. And before we begin, just a quick note to say that this podcast is for educational and inspirational purposes only. It's not intended as medical advice. Now let's dive into this episode. Hey there, and welcome back to the podcast. This episode is a little different because on August 17th, the podcast celebrates its 9th anniversary. 9 years. To be honest, saying that out loud feels quite surreal. When I sat down to record the very first episode back in 2017, when I was living in California, I had no idea where this journey would take me. I certainly could not have imagined that almost a decade later, we'd still be gathering here each week to explore this beautiful, timeless wisdom of Ayurveda together. I still remember recording that very first episode, and I probably spent more time thinking whether anyone would ever listen than I did actually recording it. I wasn't a podcaster. I was simply someone who had experienced the profound impact of Ayurveda and wanted to share that wisdom with others. At the time, I couldn't find many podcasts dedicated to Ayurveda, and so I thought, why not give it a go? I remember thinking that if just one person found the teachings helpful, it would all be worthwhile. Looking back now, even with all my fears and the thoughts of who am I to do this, I really am so grateful that I pressed publish. Over these 9 years, we've shared conversations about digestion, sleep, hormones, stress, seasonal living, daily routines, meditation, relationships, the doshas, the tissues, the mind, the nervous system, and so much more. And I've had the privilege of interviewing incredible teachers from around the world, many of whom have spent decades studying and living Ayurveda. And perhaps even more meaningful than that has been hearing from so many of you. Some of you have been listening to the podcast from those early days. Others have just discovered the podcast recently. And I've heard from many of you who tell me you listen while walking your dog, while driving to work, or preparing dinner, or maybe having your morning cuppa. Others have shared the podcast became a companion during difficult times in your life, helping you reconnect with yourself when you felt overwhelmed, burnt out, or simply disconnected. I never take those messages for granted. They actually fuel me to keep producing these weekly episodes because podcasting can sometimes feel like you're speaking into the unknown. I'm sitting here with a microphone by myself, trusting that these conversations will reach the people who need to hear them. So whenever one of you takes the time to send an email or leave a review or simply say hello on social media, it reminds me that this really is a conversation. Even if we're not in the same room, we're connected through this shared interest in living a healthier, more balanced, connected, and meaningful life. So before we go any further, I simply want to thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your curiosity, for your thoughtful questions, and thank you for inviting me into your lives week after week. It truly is an honor. As I was thinking about what to share for this anniversary episode, I initially thought perhaps I should reflect on the past 9 years, or maybe revisit some favorite interviews, or highlight the most downloaded episodes. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized that what feels most meaningful is not looking back, it's looking ahead. Because the world is changing, and faster than any of us expected. The way we learn is changing, the way we work is changing, the way we communicate is changing, and of course, the way we access information is changing too. If you've listened to the podcast for a while now, you'll know that I tend not to chase trends. Ayurveda has existed for thousands of years. It has seen countless changes in society, culture, technology, and it stood the test of time. So rather than reacting to every new development, I prefer to step back and ask, what can Ayurveda teach us about this moment? And lately I've been reflecting on one question in particular. What does it mean to be truly human in a world where information has become almost limitless? When I first started this podcast, I thought my role was to share the teachings of Ayurveda, to explain the doshas, to talk about digestion, and to share practical tips and daily routines. And of course, those things are still important. But somewhere along the way, I realized that my role had changed. Now, I don't simply want to help people understand Ayurveda. I want to support people in living Ayurveda in a way that feels realistic, sustainable, and deeply personal. Living Ayurveda is about learning to pause, to notice, to listen, to become curious about your own experience. It's about developing a relationship with yourself. And that's one of the greatest lessons Ayurveda has taught me, is that it is not asking us to become someone else. It's encouraging us to come home to who we already are. Because let's be honest, the world looks very different today than it did 9 years ago. These days, if you want to know about the qualities of Vata, Pitta, or Kapha, you can find the answer in seconds. If you want an Ayurvedic recipe, there are thousands available online. And if you're curious about herbs, routines, or seasonal practices, information is everywhere. And now, with the rapid development of AI, that access has expanded even further. In many ways, that's an incredible gift. And I actually use AI in my own business, not to replace my thinking, but to support it. It helps me organize ideas, and it saves me time on administrative tasks. Sometimes it helps me see connections that I hadn't considered before. I think technology, when used thoughtfully, can free us to spend more time doing what matters most. So this isn't an episode about fearing AI or resisting change. Quite the opposite. I think it's important that we embrace tools that genuinely help us. But I also think it's worth asking another question. If information is no longer scarce, what becomes truly valuable? For much of human history, knowledge was something we had to seek out. We learned from our parents, our teachers, our communities, and from books if we were fortunate enough to have access to them. If you wanted to study Ayurveda, you found a teacher, you attended lectures, you read every book you could get your hands on, and learning took time. But now, within seconds, we can ask a question and receive an answer. We can compare opinions from practitioners all over the world. We have more information at our fingertips than any generation before us. And that's great. Knowledge should be accessible. Ayurveda should not be hidden away or reserved for a select few. One of the reasons I started this podcast was because I wanted to make Ayurveda more approachable. I wanted to help people discover these ancient teachings that are not only relevant today, but can be woven into modern life in practical and meaningful ways. In many respects, technology has helped make that possible. People from all over the world can now discover Ayurveda. They can listen to this podcast while walking along a beach in New Zealand, commuting to work in New York, or making dinner in Ireland. That still amazes me. But as access to information has grown, I've noticed something else. Information does not necessarily make us feel more connected. In fact, sometimes it can have the opposite effect. We consume more, yet we reflect less. We know more, yet we trust ourselves less. We gather endless advice, yet we often feel more confused. Does that resonate with you? Perhaps you've experienced it yourself. You search for one answer, and before you know it, you've read 5 completely different opinions. One expert tells you to eat a certain way. The other says the complete opposite. One person recommends intermittent fasting. The other says never skip breakfast. Someone tells you to avoid fruit. Another encourages more fruit. Before long, you're left wondering, what am I supposed to believe? And what is actually right for me? One of the reasons I connected so deeply with Ayurveda is because it's logical and it resonates deeply. It not only connects us to nature, but also our own true nature. And it's completely tailored to each individual. Ayurveda begins with you, your unique constitution, your stage of life, your current state of balance or imbalance, your environment, your digestion, your energy, your unique experience. Ayurveda reminds us that context matters. What nourishes one person may not nourish another. What supports you in winter may not support you in summer. And what serves you at 25 may be very different from what your body needs at 55. There is so much wisdom in that, because rather than asking us to follow someone else's blueprint, Ayurveda teaches us to become students of ourselves, to observe, to notice, to listen, not just once, but every single day. So it becomes a way of life, building awareness and empowering you to make decisions about your own health and well-being. Over the years, I've had the privilege of working with many wonderful clients, people from different countries and cultures and stages of life. And although everyone's story is unique, I've noticed something they all have in common. Very rarely do they come to me because they simply need more information. In fact, I'd say by the time many people book a consultation with me, they're incredibly well informed. They've listened to podcasts, they've read books, they've followed practitioners on social media, and have even experimented with asking AI questions about their health and lifestyle. And I think that's wonderful. Curiosity is a beautiful thing. But what they often discover is that information is not the missing piece. It's understanding how all of those pieces fit together in their life. One of the comments I hear again and again from clients when we meet is that they finally felt understood. Not because I told them something they have never heard before, but because I listened. I took the time to understand not only their physical symptoms, but also what was happening in their life, how they were sleeping, how they were eating, what season of life they were in, how much pressure they were under, what was happening emotionally, and what support they actually had, because all of those things influence our health. One person may benefit from waking at 6 a.m. and enjoying a full morning routine. Another may be caring for young children, working shifts, or supporting aging parents. One person may have the time, energy, and desire to cook every meal from scratch. And another may be exhausted and simply trying to get through the week. Giving these people exactly the same advice is not helpful. And Ayurveda has never been about perfection. It's about meeting people where they are. That's one of the reasons I love Ayurveda so much. It doesn't ask us to fit into a system. It doesn't ask us to adapt to it. Ayurveda adapts to us. Sometimes the greatest gift I can offer my clients is not another recommendation. It's listening deeply, understanding each person's capacity, and tailoring my guidance to where they are right now. Small, individualized changes often create the biggest transformation because they're sustainable. And when someone begins to experience those changes, their confidence grows. They begin trusting themselves again. That's when healing really begins. That's also why I continue to offer my online consultations and guided cleanses. Not because I believe people need another protocol, but because having someone walk alongside you can make all the difference. Someone to listen, to reflect back what they see, someone to simplify rather than complicate, to remind you that progress is not about doing everything perfectly. It's about taking the next step that's right for you. And this came up in my recent podcast, episode 448, with my client, Athena. 10 years ago, Athena was severely ill with Crohn's disease. She was exhausted, unable to eat properly, rapidly losing weight, and in fact, she was unsure if she would even survive. In that episode, Athena reflects on the physical, emotional, and spiritual transformation that unfolded through the simple Ayurvedic daily practices we incorporated. But she also mentioned how just having my support played a major role in her healing journey. And that's the difference human support can make. Connection has a profound impact on healing, and Athena's episode offers hope, inspiration, and practical insight into the healing potential of Ayurveda. And I recommend taking a listen if you haven't already done so. That's episode 448, titled From Survival to Thriving, Athena's Ayurvedic Healing Journey with Crohn's. And Athena didn't just need information. She needed someone to listen, to support her, and to help her apply that information to her needs and lifestyle. And I'm happy to report that 10 years on, Athena is thriving and continuing to live by the principles of Ayurveda. One of the most beautiful things about working one-to-one is that recommendations evolve. What I suggest in our first consultation may look quite different in the next. As your digestion improves, as your energy changes, as the seasons shift, or as life throws you something unexpected, we adapt. Ayurveda has always been a living wisdom. It's responsive, dynamic, and it's never about following a rigid plan, regardless of what's happening in your life. And traditionally, Ayurveda was never a transfer of information. It was a relationship between teacher and student, between practitioner and the rogi or client. And perhaps one of the greatest gifts another human being can offer us is their presence, to truly listen without rushing to fix, without interrupting, and without trying to fit us in a box, just to be fully present. When I think back over the past 9 years of this podcast, I realize that's what I've been trying to create. Of course, I've shared lots of information, but more than that, I hope these conversations have felt like a companion on your journey with Ayurveda. Something you can listen to while you're going about your day. Something that reminds you to slow down, to take a breath, and to reconnect with yourself. And so now we have artificial intelligence. So where does AI fit into all of this? As I said earlier, I think it's an incredible tool. I use it myself. It's helping people learn more efficiently. It's making education more accessible. And it's helping small business owners save time. I don't see those things as negative. In fact, I think they're wonderful. But there are some things that no technology can do. It can't sit quietly with someone who has just experienced loss. It cannot notice the subtle change in someone's expression when they begin talking about their childhood, or the subtle things that arise when you're connecting with another person, the things they don't even realize they're communicating. AI cannot feel the energy in the room. It can't offer the reassurance that comes from another person's calm presence. It can't replace the comfort of a heartfelt conversation. And it certainly cannot build genuine relationships. Those are deeply human experiences. and I believe they'll become even more valuable in the years ahead. Because the more automated our lives become, the more we'll long for authenticity, the more we'll value conversations that are not rushed, the more we'll appreciate spaces where we don't have to perform, where we don't have to pretend everything is fine, where we can simply arrive as we are. When I first started studying Ayurveda, I thought the goal was to become really knowledgeable, to know all the herbs, all the Sanskrit terms, and all the principles. But now, after years of studying, practicing, working with clients, and recording these weekly episodes, I see things a little differently. I think the real practice is not accumulating more knowledge. It's cultivating awareness, because awareness creates choice, and choice creates change. You don't need to know everything about Ayurveda to begin living it. You simply need to become a little more aware of yourself. So if awareness is the foundation of Ayurveda, and if healing happens in relationships with practitioners, with teachers, with community, but most importantly, the relationship we cultivate with ourselves. So how do we create more opportunities for connection in a world that sometimes leaves us feeling more disconnected than ever? Back in 2017, when I first started podcasting, the podcast itself was enough. People downloaded an episode, listened, and perhaps sent a message if something resonated. But I think something has shifted. People are not simply looking for information anymore. They're looking for belonging. They're looking for meaningful conversations, for spaces where they can ask questions without feeling judged, where they can celebrate small victories and can admit they're struggling without feeling like they've somehow failed. Because if there's one thing Ayurveda has taught me, it's that healing was never meant to be a solitary journey. Traditionally, it wasn't. People lived in communities. Meals were shared. Wisdom was passed from one generation to the next. People supported one another through different seasons of life. There was an understanding that well-being was not something we achieved on our own. It was something we cultivated together. In fact, now we understand the impact of isolation and lack of community on our health and well-being. And that's one of the things that many of us are missing in our lives at this time. It's interesting, isn't it? We have more ways of communicating than ever before. We can send a message across the world in seconds. We can connect through social media. We can listen to podcasts from every corner of the globe. And yet, loneliness continues to grow. Many people feel isolated, overwhelmed, disconnected, surrounded by information yet longing for genuine conversation. Having awareness around this reminds us of something important. Human beings are wired for connection. And perhaps that's why so many of us still long to be seen, heard, and understood. We long for heartfelt connection, the kind where someone remembers your name, where they ask how you're doing, where you feel comfortable enough to be yourself, where you realize you're not the only one navigating the challenges of modern life. Because let's be honest, none of us have all this figured out. We're all learning, we're all growing, we're all doing our best to navigate life while caring for our health, our families, our work, and much more. And I think there's something incredibly comforting about remembering that. That understanding is really what inspired me to create the Elements of Ayurveda Podcast community. I created the community because I wanted to create a space where we could continue the conversation, a place where listeners could ask questions, share experiences, support one another, and remember that we're not walking this path alone. And each month we come together for a live Zoom gathering, and the next one is on Saturday, September 5th, if you want to join us. And sometimes we discuss a podcast episode. Sometimes someone brings a question. Sometimes we simply check in and talk about what's happening in our lives and how we're applying Ayurveda in a way that feels realistic and sustainable. Those conversations have become some of my favorite moments each month because we're connecting and learning together. I think that's a beautiful reflection of Ayurveda itself. And so as I look ahead to the future of this podcast, I feel hopeful. Yes, technology will continue to evolve. AI will become more capable. The way we learn will continue to change. I'm sure there will be developments that we can't even imagine. The future of wellness is not about choosing between AI and human practitioners. I believe it's about using technology to make knowledge more accessible while valuing human wisdom. One of my hopes is that AI won't replace our inner knowing, that instead of asking another question online every time we feel uncertain, we also pause and ask ourselves, what is my body telling me? How do I actually feel? And what do I need right now? Because Ayurveda teaches us that our body constantly communicates with us. And learning to listen to that wisdom may be one of the most valuable skills we can cultivate in the years ahead. And the qualities Ayurveda has always valued are becoming even more important. Presence, awareness, compassion, discernment, and connection. Those are not outdated ideas. They're timeless. If anything, they're becoming more essential. I think the challenge is remembering ourselves while technology continues to evolve around us. Remembering to look up from our screens, to notice the changing seasons, to sit quietly for a few moments and check in with ourselves, to share a meal with someone we love, to take a walk in nature, to truly listen when someone is speaking, and to ask ourselves, what do I need in this moment? These simple practices have always been at the heart of Ayurveda, and I believe they will continue to guide us no matter how much the world changes. When I recorded that very first episode, I thought I was pressing publish on a podcast. Looking back, I realized I was beginning a conversation that's continued every week for the past 9 years. And my hope is that it continues for many years to come. So as we celebrate 9 years of the Elements of Ayurveda podcast, I don't find myself wondering whether Ayurveda and this podcast still has a place. If anything, I feel more certain of its purpose than ever before. Because while information may become infinite, wisdom still requires experience, and ultimately, it needs to be lived. While technology can offer a remarkable structure, healing still happens in supportive relationships. And while the world continues to speed up, Ayurveda gently reminds us to slow down, to observe, to listen, and to come back to ourselves. That's the journey I want to continue exploring with you, not just through podcast episodes, but through meaningful conversations and shared experiences, and a community of people who are learning how to live Ayurveda in the real world. And if that resonates with you, I'd love to welcome you into the Elements of Ayurveda Podcast community. It's a warm, supportive space where listeners from around the world come together to continue these conversations, ask questions, share experiences, and support one another on this journey. I'll include all the details in the show notes if you'd like to learn more. And if you would like support on your journey with Ayurveda, check out my online offerings on my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com. And if you have any questions before booking, take advantage of my free 15-minute services inquiry call, and we can discuss which of my services best suits your needs. And don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast so the new episodes automatically download for you. And if you'd like to leave a rating or review, I would really appreciate that. I'd also love to connect with you on social media. If you haven't already done so, please check out my new Instagram account, Elements of Ayurveda Podcast. And on Facebook, you'll find me under Elements Healing and Wellbeing. And I'll put those links in the show notes also. And so as I close this episode, I want to say thank you again for allowing me to be part of your journey over these past 9 years. Whether, as I said, you've been listening to me from the very beginning or you've only recently discovered the podcast, I'm so grateful you're here. Thank you for your trust, your curiosity, and for walking this path alongside me. I truly can't wait to see where the next chapter takes us. And so until next time, take good care of yourself, be well, and slán go fóill. Bye for now.